What is up? Welcome back to the Vanflip podcast. Or if it's your first time, I always say welcome back. But if it's your first time checking us out, hey, welcome to the Vanflip podcast. This week, I am joined with Aaron Pauley, bassist and clean vocalist, or backup vocalist if you want to call it, for the band Of Mice and Men. Of Mice and Men. How are you doing today, Aaron?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. You guys have been kind of like busy in the last couple months, through the pandemic, obviously. You kind of did some recordings here or there. You released two EPs recently this year, Timeless and Bloom, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the question I got most about when I asked like fans of, the band, of your band, and obviously the website, what I should ask you, most questions were, are these two EPs a part of a bigger project, or is there a record coming, or are they just standalone EPs that you guys just worked on during this whole COVID time?
Yeah, so they're part of a trilogy of EPs that will come together to form an album.
Okay. And is that something that you will release as a full-length album as well, or do you have you released EPs like as far as like digital media? I'm not digital, physical media.
Yeah, so we do have physical versions. There's like delay on vinyl everywhere,
right,
so
of course.
those are shipping out. I think in a couple months, or the first one, Timeless, is already shipped out, but I think Bloom is shipping in a couple months. The third EP will be released as an EP, and then there will actually be a full LP release of all three EPs that culminate in the album. I don't know the exact order of what's going to come out first. It might be that the album comes first and then the EP comes separate, as far as, physical media.
Right.
But I think it will all be released as an album.
That's interesting. What was the idea behind releasing them in small chunks like that? And then also, what made you decide to want to actually release a full project together with it?
So basically, for us, it was something that we wanted to do even before we released our last album. So it's something that we've been talking about doing since 2017-ish, 2018-ish. I think for us as creatives, there's something more refreshing about being able to tell a story or share a piece of work that is more relevant to you at the time that it's happening. If some sort of major life event inspires you to create something, you can sort of get that into the world while it's still fresh to you. You're sharing more relevant information, I think. Mm-hmm. It's like super esoteric and cliche to say that music is the universal language, but like language is for dialogue, it's for communicating.
Right.
And you're just communicating with more relevant information, I think. So it's kind of a cool experience. You don't necessarily have to spend 6 months to a year collecting songs and then go into a studio for a month and then spend a few more months after that working on artwork and music videos and everything just to have it put out, essentially 2 years after the information is relevant to you. So it creates kind of a different experience, I think, between artist and fan.
Yeah. And it seems kind of like in the back half of your discography, you guys have been kind of steady releasing, either an album every year or every 2 years. So it does kind of make sense that you guys, worked through the pandemic, obviously. But it also is cool that you guys have done something kind of like that, where you split up, the pieces of the album over a course of time. That way also fans can enjoy it at different times and whatnot, but you also stay more relevant, which is something that I kind of I've talked about on this podcast before, but also, I feel like band type music is like one of the only genres of music that doesn't do something similar to this. Like you have hip hop artists or DJ EDM type artists. They always release kind of like either singles or EPs, and rarely do some of these artists even release full length. So yeah, it's kind of cool to see, these genres kind of catch up to that and make it. To me, it seems like it makes the band or the artist more relevant over the course of a period of time, like a year, because like you said, there is a lot of downtime, especially when you're writing or recording. And then obviously the mixing, mastering, artwork, and all that stuff, like you were explaining, it takes a long period of time to get that finished product out. So Do you find it's like less stressful doing it this way, or do you approach it as like we already recorded everything in one fell swoop and now we're just kind of divvying it out release wise?
No. So with this, we actually worked on it and released it. So I think we worked on the first EP, finished it, turned it in, and then I think we were just finishing up the second EP when the first one came out. So it's something that we've been working on. We recently like partnered with the website Twitch for live streaming.
Mm-hmm. We're going to bring that up next.
And we work on music over Zoom, which is why I have all these like awesome automated backgrounds and whatnot. And so between, there's very minimal sort of lag. It's definitely gotten better over the last year. I think Zoom was kind of horrendous at the start of.
Something tells me their stock price kind of rose up a little bit over the pandemic.
Yeah, so hopefully they reinvested some of that into the tech, but it seems to be working better. But like, you can remotely control each other's computers and do stuff. So it's we thought, why not just broadcast this? Just take the Zoom call and put the Zoom call on Twitch, because this is how we work anyway. So, doing that ended up being kind of cool too, because you sort of have a different and newly calibrated barometer of like what's exciting, and not just personally exciting to you as you're hearing new ideas going like, oh, wow, this could be a really cool song or this could be a really cool part. But you're also getting sort of the fan perspective, which I think over time and the more myopic you get in your projects, the more you sort of lose sight of that. So to be able to sort of have that panel that you can just read, oh yeah, that's cool. Or what if you did this? What if you inverted it? Just like, sometimes you just ignore it and sometimes it validates, something you're thinking too. Right, but it's just sort of cool to have that extra
input
line of communication. Yeah. It's almost like it's almost like a tool. It's almost like having an extra like input monitor,
Yeah. And I was going to ask if that's something that you kind of like, because when I was told about your partnership and how you kind of, did the recording and whatnot, it was kind of a question I had was like, well, is the audio, like, because some bands might not want to share the audio of that going on because obviously, it does leave to, not spoilers, but, people will already kind of know what they're getting the finished product is. So
they definitely peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Like they get the behind the scenes, whole method that obviously it's not the traditional method of you guys recording because, and again, you may also write over Zoom for the for previous albums. I don't really necessarily know how you guys got together and did that, but it's cool that you shared that experience with your fan base, and I'm sure you amassed a few other fans, especially being on the platform Twitch and whatnot. So how did you guys even team up with Twitch? Is that something that you guys have started doing, or was that like something that you guys were talking with Twitch to, like as a partnership, or how'd that work?
Yeah, so we had initially like created a channel. All of us like had our own individual channels, and we would stream like video games or music or whatever. And then we actually, we secured a meeting with the Twitch's musical department and whatnot, and they were talking about how they wanted to expand and whatnot. So and just figuring out ways of connecting with fans, connecting with people. Music is a lot of people's sort of lifelines. If you can sort of, since we aren't in the live entertainment realm right now, you can still entertain people, with your music. So I think if and it's cool to see sort of the different community, and like you said, it is kind of like a Wizard of Oz sort of like looking at the man behind the curtain. I think though it is only kind of a certain like sub-demographic of our fan base that even really cares. A lot of people just want to like listen to it, so not everybody wants to know exactly how it's made, but I think people who do want to know how it's made, this is kind of how we work. It's not necessarily on Zoom. It's the exact same process that we would do, but we would all be in the same room together. Yeah. But we're still working off of one person's computer. We're still inputting. It's still, hey, actually, let me get on here for a second and take control of the mouse and move something around, So we're still doing it very much the same way that we would do pre-production in the studio. But when the pandemic happened, all the studios closed down. I'd done like production work and mixing and mastering work in the past. So we just kind of talked about it. We talked about it with the label, and we were like, hey, if we just do our, typical pre-production the way that we do it, and our demos sounded great. They always sounded really good because we put a lot of work into it. And we're like, if we take it that step further and actually like record this thing like an album, like we would do an album, would we be allowed to? And the label was like, hell yeah, sure. Here you go. Nice. Here's the keys. And that's that's sort of a refreshing thing too, because it's, it allowed us more, it allowed us sort of like to rely on music as like a lifeline. There are times where you're thinking, or at least for me, I don't know when I'm going to play another show again. I know when shows are scheduled. I don't know like what the world will look like when that happens. There's a lot of nights at like 2 or 3 a.m. where you're like, damn, isn't existing strange? Oh, yeah. And it's nice to be able to have the ability to sit down at your own computer and work on what is going to be like the way that you're going to feed yourself.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a weirdly digital hunter-gatherer situation again.
Yeah, for sure.
It's an interesting psychological place to be, but it's, I don't know, it's sort of cool. It's a new thing that exists that people are using, and technology, man. The older I get too, the less it works. I used to be a teenage kid and like everything worked all the time.
Or the less you understand how it works because you're not as young and you don't fiddle or intake the information as easy as you used to. You know what I mean?
Man, it's one of my hobbies is like PC gaming and like parts and like overclocking and undervolting and just nerd shit. And I can't get Zoom audio to work sometimes. Like,
no, I get it. It's frustrating.
I mess with core clocks on a CPU, but like audio in an app? Nah, dude, my boomer brain's not like wired for that.
Yeah. Do you think do you like writing that way where it's Zoom based, or would you rather be in the room together with the guys? Like, what's easier for you all? Is it being in the comfort of your own homes, or is it being dedicated in a room to where you have a set goal and like it's not as easy to walk away from the computer?
I have my preference, I think, of I like to be in a room with people because I like to laugh, and there's always just kind of
extra bonus stuff.
Yeah, you can poke people. You know what I mean? Like people are there within like reach in your physical environment. I think, however, what I get out of it, like the intrinsic reward, is the same thing, which is like why it's awesome that we can do this, because I was worried that it wasn't going to be. There's always like sort of, you get together with your dudes and you make an album and you're hanging out and you're farting and eating burritos. And like, there's like a lot of shared life experience when you're doing the same thing with people in the same location. But I think for me, what I realized in doing this is that what I live for, I don't live for that. What I really enjoy in music making is doing something and trying to mess with something. And while I'm messing with something, I hear somebody else messing with something. And just for an instant, there's some little like hint of magic. Like, whoa, what was that?
Yeah.
Wait, do that thing again. And I'll do this thing again. And you can get those moments. That for me is like part of the reason I've never done like solo music or anything like that. Because to me, it's fun. I like writing songs by myself, but like I don't have those magical moments in my brain where I'm working on two different parts and one goes, oh yeah. There's not that like, whoa, like.
Yeah, it's definitely magical for sure. Like, the spark of creativity.
It's sort of like if you're working on a painting with like you and another painter, and you're going to paint this picture of a mountain, right? So you're starting with all the greens and your homie's just like, oh, here's a cyan, boom, right in the middle of the mountain. You're like, whoa.
Yeah.
That's cool. We can make the mountain orange. And I never thought of that because I was thinking mountains are green. I think for me, it's all about that. Even if songs never like end up coming out, it's just about those little moments, Mm-hmm. And that's why live music is so powerful, is because like people get to experience those,
Yeah, for sure. Of course. Yeah. So do you guys think this is kind of like the future of kind of like what bands, like when shows do start rolling around and everything is a little bit more back to the way things used to be? I'm not going to say normal because obviously it's probably going to be a little different. But do you foresee like bands still continuing doing these kinds of other interactive, ventures with their fan base as far as like live streaming or more, more in sharing more stuff, whether it's like the behind the scenes looks on Twitch or, Instagram Live or YouTube or whatever. Do you see that foregoing as we keep going into the future, or do you think that will kind of fall
off? No, I definitely think as technology becomes more accessible, that's sort of the route that we're all going to go. Live music is always going to have its place because live entertainment, I think, is irreplaceable.
Yes.
But I think as you have different outlets, like for me, I don't really see this as like a replacement as much as I see it as like it's just a different mode of communicaing.
Yeah,
it's a different mode of interaction. Yeah. I think it's hard to say though. You never really know with anything, I guess. I remember being in high school, like when YouTube first came out. I think it was like 2005 or 2006.
I was literally thinking about that the other day.
I might have been like a sophomore, and I remember thinking like, I wonder if this is going to be around in a few years. You know what I mean? Because at the time, you just don't know. I remember thinking MySpace was going to be its own country at one point. You know what I mean? And like,
who knows? It could have been.
Yeah, it's. Everything eventually goes the way of the buffalo, and it just works that way. Yeah. And you just don't really know how long it's going to take.
Mm-hmm.
Some civilizations were in power for thousands of years, and they're gone. Yeah, everything goes. So
there's an ebb and flow.
It's hard. It's hard to say when. And I think the older I get, the less I try. the more I'm just like. I used to think I was like swimming in the river, and now I realize I'm just kind of on a tube. And like the less I actually put my hands and feet in the water to try and change my direction, the easier the flow.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I do think, I think that bands did adapt. And again, I think they were behind the curve on that again. There were a lot of other things that were incorporating, the live stream aspect and whatnot. And I feel like a lot of bands, not just in our little wheelhouse genres here, like, metalcore, metal, and hardcore. I think bands in general kind of strayed away from that because I feel like they thought the performance live aspect was very, very key to their success, which it is, obviously. But my next question would be, do you think that these live streams, whether they're performance-based live streams or like the streams you guys had recording your album or just interacting with fans, whether it's you solo playing Twitch games or whatever, however you're streaming, interacting with fans, do you think that will that does take away from the live show, or do you think that will kind of just accompany it?
No, I don't think it takes away from the live show. I think if anything, it's just a tool for a fan to get more understanding about where the art they like comes from. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's not meant to replace it. One of the reasons why we never did like a live stream of us playing was because we all were in the agreement that like it doesn't do the same thing.
Of course. Yeah.
It won't do the same thing for us playing it, and it won't do the same thing for the fans, because I think it's just, like I said, I think that part is just irreplaceable. But I think it's sort of a way of understanding the way that things are made, and it sort of catches up to real time. I mean, I used to love getting albums back in the day that had enhanced, this is an enhanced CD. Put this in your CD drive, and you're like, oh, wow. And you can watch videos of the bands in the studio. They didn't have Twitch or YouTube, or I'm sure they would be doing it in the moment, So I think it literally, live streaming and all of that is just a byproduct of technology and information being able to get to you like that. It's not so much that it's there to replace. It's the sort of same information. It just gets you instantaneously,
Mm-hmm. And I think we're dating ourselves. I think we should explain what an enhanced CD was, because I'm sure a lot of kids that are
Oh
listening probably
yeah,
don't even
they're like
understand.
CD's nuts.
You used to put a CD in the computer, and the computer would recognize it and play like some QuickTime videos or some other kind of back end. It would be
Yeah,
like an app or something like that on the CD. So it was kind of cool. It
yeah,
wasn't the
kids, your
DVD or anything.
granddad's computer, you know, the one that has the ejectable cup holder when you push the button at the top. You
Hmm.
used to put discs in there that looked like Blu-rays, but they had way less shit on them.
Way smaller space to
Way
have
smaller
information.
space. Half the time, if you tried to put an enhanced CD in your car, it wouldn't work.
Yeah,
It
it was a
just
bummer sometimes, man.
wouldn't work. Yeah.
Also, the computer would make these foul noises when you had to connect to the internet. It wasn't always connected, you know. So,
No.
you guys are kind of one of the most successful kind of metalcore bands out there. You guys have had like a lot of success over the years. More so, you really hit gold with the Restoring Force album years and years ago. I think that charted like top 5 or top 10. Am I not right? Or am I wrong?
Mhm. Yeah, it was number, I'm looking at it, number 4 during Grammy week.
Yeah, I mean that's big
Which
time.
which is funny because the names that we're on the list with, like, we shouldn't be on that list.
Yeah. So what?
Beyonce, Casting Crowns, Bruno Mars, Imagine Dragons, Katy Perry, Daft Punk, Macklemore,
Yeah, it's
Kids
crazy.
Bop, Casey Musgraves, Eminem, Miley Cyrus, Drake, Bastille. That was everybody that came behind us.
Yeah.
And then Lord, and you know, dude, honestly, we would have been top 3. And this is like one of my least favorite animated movies, I think, of all time. You know, the reason why we weren't in the top 3 is because the Frozen soundtrack was number 1 for like ever.
Well, you have to sometimes, let that go. So,
I'm not mad at it.
yeah.
I'm not mad at it now because now it's funny too, because now I look at it and it's like things change and times change, and like your fan base, it goes from being like young teenage kids that are active on social media to like growing up, going to college, having kids, and they're not on the internet all the time, and you're not getting sort of the same level of engagement, and it's really or same type of engagement, and it's really funny that you say that, because there's a lot of times where it doesn't feel like we're one of the most successful bands. It just feels like I've been home for a year.
Oh, well, yeah.
I want to play a show again.
But I mean, you at least on the Spotify side, I don't necessarily have the numbers for your EP statistics on Apple or anything or other streaming sites, but on Spotify, I think like what Timeless has over 10 million streams collectively, and then
it's wild.
And then Bloom,
and we made it in our living rooms. Yeah. I mixed and mastered that before I got like my new computer. I mixed and mastered that on a 2012 MacBook Pro.
Wow,
anything is possible, kids.
Yeah, man. So what do you think some of the success of those, of the band was in the earlier days? Because obviously social media, like you were saying, wasn't as prevalent as it is today. But you guys did find success among like those top names that you just kind of, rambled off. Like, what do you think? Because you were a part of the band around at that time as well. So like, what do you think built into that?
I think right place, right time. I think collectively, young people really liked the genre, Warped Tour, the scene. It was its own sort of time and place. It's funny now to think back that was like sort of 10 years ago, but think back in the 2000s, in the year 2000, what did the year 1990 mean to you? Like what was the scene like in the 90s? Like it's funny to go back into that, but it's, there was a scene, and young people, young teenage kids in a mainstream, a mainstream sized conglomerate all decided that they liked Warped Tour, and they liked Hot Topic, and they liked these bands, and they cared about what we were doing, and they wanted to see videos of us doing God knows what, playing mini golf or it's honestly, it's time and place. It's it's funny to look back on 10 years, and to say like, I think it was a lot of time and place. I think the music resonated with people. The lyrics resonated with people. We used to work our asses off too. Like we would tour like 300 days out of the year.
Oh yeah, I remember.
I think the most we did was like 297 days in 365. Like it's a lot of touring. Like, I think
And that's all over the world, not just in the United States.
Yeah, but it's all just a testament to the fans. It's the fans decided that at that time and place that our band and that music would be important to them.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing I think we do on our side besides just make the music.
Right.
It's the people who are going to decide whether or not it's important enough to be successful or to be a top album or, you know, in the genre. And I think as an artist, the more you sort of realize that and the less you think about that, the more your art will actually resonate. Because as soon as you start thinking about like art as cause and effect, like you're not going to get the effect. It's not archery. You're not like shooting targets, you know?
Right. Do you think, I mean, like outside of your fan base that you guys had or have around that time frame, do you think like charting like that was a positive or a negative for someone who didn't really know of Mice and Men as a band? Like, because usually, stereotypically, you don't necessarily see a metalcore band, you know, with that kind of success on the charts, unless they're like, you know, like Metallica or some other kind of like ungodly large band. At the time, though, you guys were relatively like, not in the beginning, but you were fairly new as well. You know, you only been around a handful of years and such, but like for someone else who didn't know of Mice and Men, do you think like that person was either drawn or pushed away by that kind of charting success?
It depends. I think in heavy music, there's like a weird, I've used this word twice, sub-demographic of like gatekeepers that won't like something that a lot of other people like, which to me has never really made that much sense. Because like, if I go to a restaurant and people are in mass numbers saying that they really like this item, I've never been like, oh, well then it's probably shitty. Like that's never made sense to me. It's like, it's probably good. Yeah. I probably want to try that thing too.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that my opinion needs to be their opinion because it's their opinion, but a lot of people aren't wrong, you know? Yeah. I mean, maybe they are, I don't know. But opinions it's all subjective anyway, right?
They're like buttholes. Everyone's got one, man.
Yeah, dude. And everyone wants to show you theirs and talk about it. Like, it's like, oh man, I don't...
Keep it to yourself, man. We don't need to see.
Yeah, you know, I didn't ask.
So up until about Earth and Sky, your last full-length release, you guys were working with Rise. You guys have been signed to Rise, I think, from the first release on. But the last two EPs, and I'm assuming the full length is going to come out on Sharptone as well.
Correct.
What kind of led to just leaving Rise and joining Sharptone? Like, what was the cause and effect of that?
The band had signed a deal. We had then renegotiated and signed another deal. And then that deal had just concluded when Earth and Sky was released. And so, you know, Rise are good friends of ours and we love them still. We just felt like it was time creatively to try something else. And I'm really happy we did because I love making albums and working with Sharptone. It's definitely sort of a more kind of hands-on, I guess, approach. I don't know. Feels more boutique, I suppose.
Interesting. I mean, they definitely have done a lot of work in the last couple of years to kind of like cement themselves even further into the heavier metalcore scene because, again, they have been releasing, you know, really good albums in the last handful of years. So it's kind of cool. And no offense to Rise, but obviously Rise, I feel like, does a little bit more outside of heavy music, too. They do dabble in other genres a little bit. So, you know, it also may be beneficial as a heavy band to be on a label that kind of focuses more so on heavy music, too.
Oh, definitely. You know, for us, when we were taking meetings, Sharptone was a big name on our minds because we love so many of the young bands that are coming out on that label.
Yeah.
And if there is sort of anything that we can give back to a scene that gave a lot to us, we felt like it would be cool to be on a label with a bunch of bands like that, to where if we could bring any sort of visibility at all, not that they need it, you know what I'm saying? Right. I don't want this to come off like that, but if
But you could go on tours with other band or with other
yeah,
other label
100%
mates,
to
you know
be
what I mean?
to be a part of that ecosystem, you know, to say like, hey, if we can bring some eyes and ears to these other bands that are going to be on this label, and they're bands that we like, you know, like we listen to a lot of the bands that are on the label anyway, just as fans.
What are some of those bands? Not to interrupt you, but you know, my next question was like, what bands attracted you to Sharptone?
Loathe, love Loathe.
Of course.
Great record, great dudes. Caskets is actually a band that I'm really excited about their record coming out. Fuck, so many. I need to have like another cup of coffee, dude. I'm like,
well, not only that, I put you on the spot.
An esoteric brain land, but no, yeah, because I'm gonna say one that's not Sharptone, and I'm gonna be like I'm gonna realize it, you know,
well, it's all
10
good.
minutes later.
Even new and up and coming bands obviously are always a bonus too, because it's the scene just growing and the scene just replicating itself over and over again. So it is good to see the growth, obviously.
Well, and it's exciting. It's exciting to hear sort of an evolution of something not that you created but contributed to.
Right.
I think our music, it has a flavor that is distinctly not super modern, because it's not super modern. We've been doing it for 10 years, you know. But I don't want to say old, but you know what I mean? Like we're not at the cutting edge of what the genre is doing. You know what I mean?
Right,
because that's never really been where we've existed. We just like writing songs that make us feel something and that we can bang our heads to. And like, we're not really trying to push boundaries outside of our own boundaries. You know what I mean? Like, we're not genre bending really or anything like that, but there are tons of new bands that are doing that. And it's cool. You know, I think you only really have your first and second albums once and twice. You know what I'm saying?
True. Yeah, that's true.
So beyond that, you sort of carve out a lane, you know?
I get that. Yeah, I understand that completely. We just kind of had like not a anniversary, I guess you call it an anniversary, but Chester, you know, of Linkin Park, and his death anniversary kind of just recently happened here. And you guys did a couple things with Linkin Park, a couple tours and shared stages and stuff like that. Like, were you guys, I don't want to say close, you know, with Chester or anything like that, but like, how was your interaction with the band in general? Like, and how did it affect your band? Not the death of Chester, obviously, just like your, you know, your relationship with them.
Oh, dude, Chester was my dude. You know, one of my big regrets was there were a handful of times he invited me over to hang out and I just couldn't make it because there's always next time. Right.
Yeah.
And, yeah, he was honestly somebody that, like, if I needed big bro in regards to like something music related or touring related, or like, dude, my fucking throat hurts and like I have to play a few gigs, like give me a sort of, yeah, he was that guy, and he made himself accessible enough to be that guy. Yeah, he was just like, he made time for people. He made time for people in the venues, arena staff, when we would be in Germany and there's a little kid who's like got the gig working, you know, security checking people's laminates. And he's like, oh my God, that's Chester from Linkin Park. And Chester would make it a point to, like, you know, I think he understood that he could bring happiness to people and not necessarily have to do a lot, which I think is one of the biggest gifts that, like, people caring about something you do can reward you with, is the ability to, like, make somebody's day and not have to try that hard. Yeah. You know, just by giving somebody your time. Like, I think it's important. I think social media and things like that, they convolute it now because people can just as easily be anonymously shitty as being anonymously kind. And people will always choose to do that for whatever reason. But yeah, no, Chester was awesome. I think about him often. You know, one of the last day, it was actually the last after the last show of the Hunting Party tour, when we were in England, he actually gave me a Marley Bluetooth speaker, just like a wooden Bluetooth speaker, randomly. We were like, it was the end of tour party. We were at like his hotel room with like all of the bands, and everyone was just talking about their favorite shows, and it's really awesome. And then as we were walking out, because he would always randomly do random things, and he said, "Hey, AP, before you go, do you want a Bluetooth speaker?" And it's like, I'm going to fly home tomorrow. My suitcase is already full. And I was like, absolutely, because I'm not going to say no. Like, and he's like, yeah, I bought this to like try it out. I've been jamming. It sounds really good. And I still have it. So every time we like make new songs, I listen to mixes on it.
That's cool.
Were
you kind of like shocked because obviously like you had personal experiences with Chester and whatnot, and most of the people in the entire industry, if not world, do not have those experiences and don't know him on a personal level. Not saying I don't want to like preface it and say that you were like tight brothers or whatnot, and you could be. I just don't want to give that that implication out there without that. But were you kind of shocked when you heard the news and stuff like that of his passing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm shocked anytime I hear about it, or anytime I hear about anybody passing unexpectedly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had just seen them not, I feel like, too terribly long before that. Yeah, I remember we were all together, me, Phil, and Tino. We were actually working on the song Warzone from Defy. And that was a song that I was going to text Chester and ask him to sing on, because it was a really aggressive song. And it just never got around to that. Yeah, that was a really, really heavy day. Yeah, I guess people in the older generation, they say, people our age remember where you were when JFK passed. It's like, I don't really have a lot of like super vivid memories about lots of things. But I can like vividly remember that. We were in my living room. I remember like what the lighting was like. It's very strange, but
yeah, it's just one of those things like
very heavy. Yeah, we weren't like best friends or brothers or nothing, but it was like he would randomly text me, and I know I could text him about something, and he would hit me back.
I mean, that alone is more of a relationship than like I'm assuming 98% of the world had. So, you were someone close enough to do that at least, and I know it probably affected you in ways. But outside of his death and Chester in general, how did like rubbing elbows with bands like that? How does that affect the group in general? Like, does it affect your goals? Does it affect your writing? Like your writing? Like what input does those big, huge bands give to a band like Of Mice and Men?
I would say as much as you open yourself up to, and that's maybe not necessarily true for every big band or for anything like that. In my personal experiences, touring with a band like Linkin Park, you can learn as much as you will open yourself up to learning about, and as much as you're willing to ask about things. I learned so much from Mike Shinoda about like song structuring and about the way he thinks about adding melodic layers, and the way that, every, 8 beats to 16 beats of a song, something needs to be new and introduced to your ear. Something needs to keep the song moving. Something needs to be foundational, like, and then, learning about things on the back end, talking to them about, hey, how much are you paying your agents? How much are you doing this? What does your record deal look like? Things like that. When we actually started the tour, they allowed us, and the tour that we did with them was us and Linkin Park playing arenas an hour and a half after doors, to full arenas. Yeah. And they said you can use a third of our lighting, and I believe it was like 60% of our, or a third of our video and 60% of our lighting. And we were like, holy shit. Like, what are we going to do?
Production with that? Yeah.
We played a show, and after the first couple shows, I think it might have been Mike was like, do you guys have spotters? Like spotlights? We're like, no, we don't, because they cost money. You have to like pay for that. Somebody has to sit up there and do that. Like, and he was like, yeah, All right. And then literally they gave us more of their lighting rig and had spotters and covered it, you know.
That's cool.
Just because they wanted our show to look good.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's part of their show too, you know.
Sure, but they don't have to do that.
No, of course not.
Nothing that we did would impact their show negatively. We wouldn't have even had to have been there, and every ticket would have been sold.
That could also be true. I wouldn't say every ticket.
It is. Yeah. And it was, man. It was something to see. There was a lot of days where we would play, and I would just go out and watch like the first half of the show. And then I'm like, oh shit, they're starting the medley. Like I have to sing this part. And then I'd like go rush back and put my in-ears in. And then, you know, they invited me to sing with them on stage. Oh, yeah. And then years later invited me to do the same song with them at like Rock in Rio.
That's crazy, man.
Not on the same tour, but just like, hey, you remember we used to do the song? You want to come up and do the song? Like, it's so cool. It got to a point where like, it felt like experiencing my friends' bands. Yeah, and your friends' bands are, at least for me, my friends' bands were always my favorite bands. Like, it's just something about it, you know? And like, to sort of have that experience of like, not only was the music like super important and like transformational to me as in my youth, but like then as an adult to be able to thank them for like steering certain parts of my career or certain parts of my songwriting in right directions. And at the same time, I will say that probably none of that would have happened if like we wouldn't have like made it known that we wanted to learn, you know, and not only that, but to make it known that like we enjoyed being there.
Yeah. Well, you could also have been that band.
We knew everybody. We knew everybody on their like technical crew and like the people that would like build the stages and stuff. Yeah. Because they would be loading in and we would be there, you know, and the band doesn't like fly in till later or whatnot. And we would just be there hanging. So,
and you don't have to, and you don't have to open yourself, like you said, you don't have to open yourself up to any of that stuff too. Like you guys could have been like the metalcore band thinking like, ugh, we're playing with this new metal, you know, giant new metal radio band. And, you know, it's two separate things, you know what I mean? But, you know, you guys embraced it. And obviously it was for the betterment of your, not only career, but your band and your process and stuff too.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't imagine. It'd be like if you were into sports, right? And you love playing soccer and you're like, yeah, I get to go play with Cristiano Ronaldo, but like, I'm kind of just more of the street soccer. I don't know. I'm going to just kind of just, you know, do my own thing over here. It's like, you could like learn something from this guy.
Yeah, for sure.
Even something as small as like, hey, when you kick it, try, you know, putting your foot a little more like this. Like little things can drastically like impact you and impact your life. You just sort of have to open yourself up to it.
So I'm assuming Linkin Park was one of those bands back in the early 2000s you were jamming as much. I mean, myself also I was one of those individuals. I think the only time I actually ever saw them was at like 01 Ozfest in Tampa or whatnot. But what were some other like early influences that, you know, got you into wanting to do music, especially heavy music at that?
What probably the biggest for me is Papa Roach, because I grew up in Vacaville, which is the city that Papa Roach is from. It's a town of about, I want to say now it's probably a little shy of 100,000. At the time it was like a town of maybe like 60, smallish town. And yeah, I was a young kid who was just getting into playing guitar, and the local band from my hometown that would play the shows next to the skate park wrote a song that everybody in the world knew.
And still knows, man.
And still knows. And it was one of those things that like people in our town knew that song already. Well, people that went to shows, you know what I mean? People that were part of that scene. And I was just a little kid. Like I was going to the skate park and went to like a couple. But to see that and to just be like, wow, like I used to be really fascinated with history, right?
Right.
To me, that was sort of like the equivalent of having your name on the inside of the pyramids as like, you were here at this point in time and
yeah.
you did this.
Oh,
and now people know about the town and people know about the experiences and the feeling that you get from being in a place where you're not mentally stable. That's actually something that millions of other people can relate to. Like that song did a lot for my tiny little brain, like thinking about things, connecting the dots, you know, like what does this mean in the grand scheme of like what you can do with your existence? Like I don't know.
Yeah, I had somewhat of a similar experience. I wasn't playing music at the time. I was more wanting to be like a front man, I guess you could say. But my hometown band was Limp Bizkit, and they obviously like shot into the stratosphere after Faith and all that stuff. So it was kind of a crazy similar experience, you know. And God, Cut My Life into Pieces, whatever the song is.
I do. Last Resort, baby.
Yeah, Last Resort. Whatever that thing. God, I remember that thing catching wildfire, and it was just all over the place. And you know, I definitely really loved that album. I can't say I really followed the band much after that, because shortly after being into nu metal for a handful of years, I kind of found like Glassjaw and Hatebreed, and then I just fell down the rabbit hole of like hardcore metalcore metal. But yeah, those experiences, like, you know, being into your local scene, like I even got to live it all over again when I got into hardcore, and Evergreen Terrace became like, you know, a name that everyone else outside of Jacksonville knew. So it's really cool to see that, and it's really cool that, you know, kids should know that can happen to anybody at any time. You know what I mean? Like any band, either you're in a band or you're a fan of a band or you're watching a band in your hometown. Anything could happen, and then next thing you know, you're a part of that movement. You're on the, you know, like you said, you're on the pyramid, inside the pyramid, and you are a part of the, you know, you're etched in stone as a part of that scene and whatnot. And those memories and stuff like that you can take with you forever. And again, like I try to explain like what it was like seeing Evergreen Terrace in like a hole in the wall in like the first album, and like the entire city, it feels like, show up, and it's just hot as hell in there, and it's just crazy. And you're just kids
spray painting T-shirts out in the back with a stencil that you can buy for $5, dude. Yeah. I missed those shows.
Yeah, it's just crazy. It's crazy how, you know, it goes from that to like where you're sitting now. You know, like where you've done arena tours, and it's all the same thing for the most part.
All emails. Every job is emails. Have you ever heard that? Have you ever heard that like there aren't different jobs. There is one job, and it's emails. It's just emails about different things.
I mean, that's all it takes.
It's the same thing, dude.
That's how I got you on the podcast. That's how I got everybody else on the podcast. That's how I got the podcast job. Yeah.
There's taxes. There's like a whole business side to it.
Yeah.
You know, going back to what you were saying earlier about, you know, it seemed like artists, you know, were putting the majority focus of importance on the art into the live show. In the reality, it's just the business. The business is funded by the live show in most cases, you know. So it's interesting. It's the business was largely touring, and in order to keep touring, you had to write albums to tour. Mm-hmm. But now you have to write albums because people are going to listen to your albums, and streaming is what's going to earn you revenue if you can build it. And you might not be touring for a while. So all of a sudden the whole model is sort of flipped on its head. You're not really writing albums so that you can play shows. You're like, oh, I have to actually create something that like means more beyond that. And I'm not saying people's albums didn't mean more beyond that, but you know what I'm saying? It was like for a reason.
You know, you have to think of it like
was a brand. So you could keep touring and keep making money. It was not so that you could share something with the world. It wasn't just that, you know?
Yeah. Like
now that touring's out, it sort of is that, you know? For us, you know, I purposely did a lot of stuff in this record on the production side and mix master side, like for headphones, because I figured people are going to be listening to this in their cars and in their headphones, and probably not on a stage until at least next summer. So,
well, you speaking of that, because it's interesting that you brought that up, because obviously most music these days, especially on Spotify and all the streaming platforms, is mixed and mastered that way. Will you mix and master the physical media or the physical media differently than for the streaming?
There is like an album. Well, discernibly, if you're listening to it, no. Technically, yes. If you're talking about like basically just limiting the threshold, like that a limiter is going to make the max peak at, because you can have it, set to negative 0.1 dB if you're doing like CD audio, if you're true peak limiting. This is like really kind of nerdy shit.
It happens.
But streaming services don't want your song that loud. They'll actually, if you turn in a super loud master to Spotify, they'll end up turning it down, like to match everything else, because they can't. It's not in Spotify's interests either for everything to sound super different level wise or quality wise, or so there is some sort of like, you can turn something in that they might be like, oh, let's bring this down a little bit, but no, like I mean, the physical will sound better because you're not listening to something that's being streamed. Dude, technology's gotten to the point now where it's like a 320 kilobyte MP3 or a WAV file to me in my like $1,000 headphones.
Yeah.
I don't have $1,000 headphones. That's a lie. That was like a flex. That's not true. I think my most expensive set of headphones is like $200.
Yeah. One of the things
as I said, $1,000 headphones, I was like, oh, I can have $1,000 headphones. Hyperbole.
One of those things about like the old days in the scene was that kind of makes me cringe a little bit now listening back is the mixing and mastering of certain records and such. Because obviously the technology wasn't there, the abundance of it wasn't there either. Back in the day, you'd have to like go to a studio. Regardless of like maybe your friend had one, like, and it was a shitty studio, or you paid a lot of money.
That was me. I had the shitty studio.
Or you paid a lot of money to go to a studio that you felt completely out of place in. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's crazy how things have just become so, the playing field is just kind of almost level, like you said.
Oh yeah,
you're doing a lot of the work in house, and that saves money obviously for the band.
Well, and the top level people that have their names associated with the plugins, like if it's the Howard Bensons or your Chris Lord-Alges, or that like top level guys use a lot of the same stuff. Like they use this technology. I remember I was talking with Howard. He has a Howard Benson Vocals plugin. I use it all the time. I loved the way that he produced my vocals on Defy, and he literally sent it to me in advance before it came out. He said, I want you to try this. I'm using it, and I'm like, damn, it sounds like our record. And he's like, dude, I love it. I don't have to use like 5 or 6 more things to get the sound. I can just use this now. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Even if it's modeled after all the amazing stuff you have, once it's there and it's available, you don't have to like fight the technology anymore. One of the big things I really love about making music and like us doing our own albums is it's caught up. I don't have to sit there and like tinker with drums. Like, how do I make these drums not sound like shit? Like the samples sound good, which means you can just write a part and you can write guitars and you can get past oh, this sounds terrible, I can't see the diamond in the rough. Like you're already starting with the diamond sticking half out, because people have mined that enough for you. Mm-hmm. And they have sampled the best guitar amps in the nicest studios with the nicest preamps. And when everything gets turned into zeros and ones from input to output, if the zeros and ones of the actual recorded amp versus the zeros and ones of the digitally modeled amp, if they're the same, that wave file sounds the same. Yeah. So it's all kind of moot.
Yeah. So last little question here. Austin left the band, in 2017 or whatever. You're for the most part longtime screamer guy, vocalist. How did that affect the group going forward? And like, was it negative? Was it positive? At the time, and like, how did that affect writing and such going forward for you guys?
For us, like at that point, the future was sort of uncertain, and it was uncertain because we didn't want to decide on anything. If you've put X amount of years of your life, blood, sweat, and tears and mileage into something, we all just kind of sat back and were like, we don't have to make any immediate decisions about anything right now. Like, it's just, he left the band for his health. Let's just like, when like the time is right to do something, we will kind of, I think, know. So I think a couple weeks went by. We all just like we started getting together, just like jam, because we're like, well, we were a band. Like, we had a room out in Anaheim with all of our gear. We're like, let's just we call it making noise. There's a difference between rehearsing and practicing and making noise. Making noise is when we don't use the in-ear rig and we turn everything up and just make noise. And so we're like, let's just get in the room, make noise. So we started kind of jamming. At one point, we started hooking up some of the in-ear gear and playback. We play to a click track live. There's not like a lot of tracks. I think there's like string accompaniment, but it's basically set up to where if it fails, like you're not going to notice. Yeah. You know, like we are definitely not a track heavy band. Because like I set it up and I just don't want to. So like we play live. But like, you know, we started jamming and then we're like, yo, play Bones Exposed. We have it on the click, it's set up. And I remember I was playing bass and just like, I just started doing the vocals, started just doing the lead vocals while I was playing. I used to scream and sing in my old band and not play an instrument. So like, I knew technically I can do it. So we just started doing it. We jammed through the song. We all kind of looked at each other like, it's not bad. Like, yeah. A little practice, you know, like I think we could make this work. And so we just kind of stuck to it. I think for us, more importantly than ourselves, we knew that we were going to still make music together. We didn't know if it would be F Mice or it would be a new project. Like we knew that the way forward was music because that's just what we've got, you know.
Yeah.
But it was at that point the band had become bigger than any of us or all of us, and it had meant something to more people than just us, to where we felt like if we could do justice to the back catalog. And by that, I mean, like, you know, we've won, like, I'm looking at, like, they're on my desk because we have two of them, like, from the Golden God Awards or whatever, their best live band. Like, we used to, like, we won awards at one time for, like, this thing. We felt like if we could do that, if we could live up to, and we set the highest standards for ourselves, like, if we could live up to our standard of live show with these songs that we know still matter to people, like, then we're going to do this. And so, we spent like a couple weeks just jamming and we're like, all right, book it. Book the studio time. We're going to write songs. We're going full steam ahead. And then that's when we made Defy.
Was it hard for you to transition into doing both clean and unclean vocals in one night? Like, or was that something that you kind of just reached back into your repertoire of being a frontman previously, that it was just easy for you?
I think some of the endurance takes time, but that takes time anyway. Mm-hmm. Like if we were going to be doing a tour in, 2 months, then I would have to smoke less weed, start exercising, doing vocal exercises, like getting vocal endurance. It's sort of like anything. It's like, to me, it's sort of like when fighters do like fight camp, like 6-8 weeks out before a fight, they start fight camp, and that's when they get like in shape. There's a lot of that, like even in touring and stuff, because it is like a really athletic sort of thing. I forgot the fucking question.
I was just asking if it was hard to kind of switch up from doing just clean vocals to both.
That was the question. Yeah, it was mostly just the endurance side of it. And then it was learning sort of how to be a frontman, how to like sort of guide the audience through the show, because it is supposed to be a show. It's not just, hey, watch me do this thing. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
And
like
you're also playing bass the entire time too, correct?
At the time, yeah. After I had like it's not back surgery. It was surgery on skin on my back. But after, like, that happened in 2019. We had to cancel some dates on a Beartooth tour. I had like pre-melanoma, I guess, come back in a biopsy. So I had to like leave. We had to go back home basically from tour, and I had to get like an excision surgery where they cut like a bunch of flesh out. But then we went back out on tour and I wasn't playing bass anymore. I was just like fronting. And then our fans were like, yeah, we like that. And I was like, well, I like playing bass. but I'm here for you in that capacity. I still play bass on the records, but like
Not live.
the live show is for you. It's for me too, but it's for you. And if you prefer that, and the vast majority of people were very vocal about that, so we've just like stuck with it. So I haven't played bass live since 2019.
So for a handful of your shows,
like middle of 2019. But then again, I didn't play a show last year, so
yeah, that's what I was saying. Like a handful of your shows and whatnot. But going forward, obviously, you will have a touring bassist, I'm assuming.
Yeah. And that's our homie Rod Sudani from the band Volumes.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He's like our brother. I love that guy. I was texting him this morning.
Well, let's wrap it up with what else is on the docket outside of the third EP and final full project release. Do you have a date for the album release at least?
There is no date yet. We're currently like finalizing album artwork. It looks awesome. We've been working with Derek Hess, who
nice.
I think didn't he do Evergreen Terrace cover back in the day?
Yeah, he did a bunch of stuff. I want to say fuck, dude. Yeah, a lot of albums. Because when you said that name, I was like, bing.
Yeah. Oh, for us too. I know he did. I think he did Poison the Well too.
Yeah.
Converge posters and shit back in the day. He's phenomenal. That's been great too to like sort of bridge those connections.
Yeah.
I was a little new metal kid, and and then I changed my bondage pants for some camo shorts and a black bandana and went to shows.
We've lived the same life, AP. We've lived the same life.
And then what did I do after that? I had like a little indie phase, I think, like Death Cab, kind of.
That happens, man. I've done the same
thing.
Yeah,
because I was like early 20s. I was like, I like coffee now. I'm a grown man.
Keep hearing about Iron and Wine on tour. Who's this Iron and Wine guy? And then you get into your late 20s where you're like, everything I liked when I was 13
before I was told that it was all whack is actually all the cool shit. And that's what I'm going to be into now.
Yep.
So it's like things like video gaming, like new metal,
it's all coming back,
like
man.
Aliens, Bigfoot, like, dude, all that, like at any point where it's like, dude, that's not cool. It's like, that's all the cool shit. You get old enough to where you're like, I can afford all this stuff now.
Yeah. Well, no, that's
Legos. I don't have any, but like I've thought about it. I've honestly thought about it.
I would say stop.
In Target, and I'm like,
I would say don't, because it's just going to be like a snowball effect, and then you're going to have like hundreds of pounds of Legos. You know what I mean? Like, What do you do? Do you buy like just the Lego do you buy the sets, or do you just buy like the box with all the different Legos in it? You know what I mean?
No, you got to buy the sets. If you just buy the blocks, then you're making something like 30 feet tall if it's going to look like anything.
And people do that. I mean, get on.
I know.
It's crazy,
dude. At Disneyland,
Lego
downtown Disney, they got like the giant dragon. It's like, okay, I get it.
Takes a long time.
That's what you can make out of those blocks, or you can make tiny little cubes.
Yeah,
can't make much else on a smaller scale,
Or you could do some Star Wars or Harry Potter backdrops.
Those are so sick too.
Yeah. Well,
do you remember Mighty Max back in the day? Those little things that you could for sure never sell them in 2020 because kids would probably choke on them. They were like,
are they the ones that you could hang upside down? They had like
No, they were like, Mighty Max was this thing. It was maybe like this big around, and it looked like a skull.
Oh,
and you would open it up, and it had the tiny little Mighty Max.
It was the male version of the
Polly Pocket.
Yeah, Polly Pocket. Yes, I do. Yeah, dude, kids would choke on that shit so bad.
Oh my god, now. Dude! And then creepy crawlers, where they're like, here's an oven and like a bunch of like
goo,
synthetic, sort of synthetic quick setting.
It's funny you brought
substance, and it's like you just gave that to kids. On the box it says 7 and up. Dude, I watched my cousin just go and squirt it in his mouth once. I watched it.
It's non-toxic. It's all good, or hopefully it was. But it's funny you bring that up because my sister, who is younger than I am, my younger sister recently was like, "Yeah, I used to sneak in your room and just make your creepy crawlies."
Damn, that's so sick. That's also so hosed if you're like, dude, I'm out of juice. And then they just stop making it.
Where's my black goo, or whatever.
Oh, yeah, dude. You got to do half black, half red tarantulas.
Yeah, of course. That was cool shit, man. We had cool toys back in the day,
Hell yeah, dude.
All right. AP, it was great having you on the show. Is there any last little comment that you either want to say or shout out, bands or whatnot, younger bands that you're working with or that you know about or anything like that?
Man, shout out to anybody listening to this. Anybody that's made it this far in, shout out to you. Thank you for caring about music and the people that make it and the people like David that help bring it to you and make it more accessible. Thank you for your time. Anybody who wants to know more about us, just follow us on the socials. Google of Mice and Men. If you start getting a bunch of Steinbeck book results, then just type band after it and you'll find us. We're on there. We're on the net.
They most definitely are, yeah.
Twitch.tv/of mice.
And how often do you guys stream?
We're there like 4 days a week.
Okay.
4 days a week for like 3-4 hours.
And do you post a schedule on your socials or do you?
Yeah, so we actually have this. We actually have the schedule on twitch.tv/of mice. It's Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, 11 a.m. Pacific.
Nice. Well,
and we just get together, we jam, we write music, we hang out with fans. Yesterday we did like a house remix of Bloom.
Nice.
Started off atrocious, and actually by the end of it was like pretty good disco track. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, I like house music. I'll check it out.
Most of the time we just work on new original music. For stuff that will almost certainly end up on an album. What's funny is Obsolete is our second most played track on Octane on satellite radio. Mm-hmm. And we did that entire song on Twitch, except for me tracking vocals, just because like no one wants to hear that. I'm sure somebody somewhere, here's the thing.
Someone does, but it's
vocalist like... Twitch is awesome when you're performing for people. Recording is not performing for people. Recording is doing the same line like 10 times and then listening back to them being like, I can't say this word right. Like, what's the difference between this take and this take? I don't know, but I got to pick one.
Yeah, it's a lot of frustration and stuff. Repetitive stuff.
I'm sure somebody would watch it, but I don't know. We haven't got that far yet. But it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, man.
So
it's fun to see the genre adapting to new ways to brand themselves, to reach their fans and such like that, and it's always cool to talk about that. And actually, now that I'm thinking about that, I also have one last question because I was thinking about live streams, and then Code Orange popped into my head. So I have to kind of
ask me about it.
I have to ask about the beef. Is the beef still ongoing?
I hope not.
Okay.
No, it happened from my understanding. And when Alan told me about it, he was like, I wasn't talking shit to them. I was trying to big up Norma Jean because I remember really wanting them to win back in the day. And I was like, well, now, Alan, you stepped in it because half your band really likes this band's music and like we've hung out and now there's beef. They told him to eat shit. And I think I liked it. I think I favorited that tweet. Back before it was liking tweets and you favorited things, I was like, this is one of my favorite tweets.
Yeah.
No, but there's no beef. I don't have beef with anybody, man. Life is too short, and there's so many other things in the world that want your energy. There's so many other things in the world that are like, hey, care about me. Mm-hmm. I don't know, man.
No, I mean it's good that we'll end on this positive note that there's no beef between Of Mice and Men and Code Orange. As if you were to look on the internet, there you may find that, but it's good to know that half the band is a fan of the band. I'm sure more than half of the band is a fan of that band now too, especially because
the album Forever I think was like both on me and Tino's like most played Spotify.
Well, that's awesome, man. That's awesome.
Then Alan had to go start beef.
Hey, it makes life interesting a little bit. You know what I mean? It's content.
No.
We'll just say it's
shout out to them. Shout out to anybody doing their thing and progressing genres and making music for their fans. I got nothing but
yeah. It's all gateways, man. It's all gateways. Someone's going to find Code Orange and then find some like a Loathe or some more underground band. Same thing with Five Finger Death Punch, Disturbed type bands. That's just the little crust. You itch under the crust and you get deeper and deeper and you find more and more and more, man.
Yeah. Music's sick.
It is.
Happy to be a little
part of it.
Ripple somewhere in there.
Yeah. It's awesome, man. Well, AP, thanks again. And
wait, I have a question for you now.
Go ahead. Hit me.
We toured with Limp Bizkit. They have the most rabid fans of any band we have ever toured with.
Okay.
When I'm talking about the pit, Limp Bizkit has the gnarliest pits, just the gnarliest crowds. We toured with Slipknot. Limp Bizkit pits were scary. It was just people like hurting each other. Like it was psycho. We toured with them out in Australia. And then we played some shows with them. I want to say we played at shows stateside. That might not be true. But yeah, we toured with them. We've done a bunch of shows with them. Every single time they play and it's pandemonium. Like it kicks in and people just want to like rage.
Yeah. They have that song Break Stuff. I mean, that's what, you know, you think about it. Yeah, it's all that's the pit.
There's I don't know. But you said that's your hometown band. Is it something in the water out there? Are there more bands like that could incite that sort of fury that we just don't know about?
I wish there were more bands like Limp Bizkit out there that were from here, but there's not. I mean, again, I'm sure you've heard of Florida, man. Florida is a crazy place.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So it is a little different.
The most hosed superhero.
Yeah, I mean, no, I think Bizkit it's its own enigma, man. I think it's just one of those things where, like, again, they were, you know, it's crazy because they're from here and they're just like a local band for a little bit, but they became like this huge thing, and you know, like obviously the Woodstock situation, which isn't really their fault, but they get painted as the people that incited the riot at Woodstock. So, you know, when people hear about that, obviously, when they see them live, they want to replicate something like that. You know what I mean? They want to live that crazy mosh pit stuff. But yeah, honestly, Fred and Wes are two people that I really want to get on the podcast, but they live out by you and not by me anymore. So, you know, if you want to drop a line or whatever, if you got like any kind of, you know, pull or connection, you know, I'll take that. But no, it's good. And it's cool that, you know, like you said earlier, we can start liking stuff we used to back in the day, because I always had to secretly like them being a fan, like being in the scene. I couldn't be like, oh yeah, fucking Limp Bizkit. I still listen to them all the time. I could never say that, but now I just constantly say it.
And Limp Bizkit goes harder than your favorite hardcore band anyway. This is true. Yeah. Like there's no shame in it. They just go so in.
They get a bad rap, but like you can't. Anyone that listens to this has never listened to Limp Bizkit, and if you got this far, I strongly suggest you putting on $3 bill and not liking it. There's no way.
This dude, I don't know. I like
still
it.
Listen to that shit.
I'm unashamed.
Yeah. Well, AP, I'm gonna go listen to some more Limp Bizkit right now. And you go do what you're doing. Have a second cup of coffee.
All right.
And we'll hopefully next time. Yeah, hopefully next time we touch base together, it'll be an in-person podcast like we normally have done prior to the pre-pandemic. So have a good one, brother.
Hey, you take it easy. All right.
Thanks, man.
Bye.